Hey everyone, Sari here, and welcome back to another week of Anima Season Defense matches. I didn't end up making any changes to the setup this week. It held up pretty well last time, and most of my brainstorming went into the Dark Defense, so things are just the same as usual for now. Edelgard and Felix are still both very effective bodyguards for the team, and help keep it difficult to just pick off a target before retreating. And Eliud's rally really ends up catching people off guard a lot of the time, especially when there are two dancers to help him move forward afterwards. Rashad is really one of the most flexible threats on this team too, since having access to a flash effect and wind sweep and fatal smoke just really help her to crack open any tank that tries to handle this setup. Overall, the defense really held up well last week, and we didn't end up losing a single point of lift all week. The only loss was mitigated by one knockout, and didn't count anyway since it was a knockout. So I'm pretty happy with how this defense is still holding up. It's good to see. Let's get to the first match. This one was a fun way to start the week off. It's always nice to start with a win. But they also brought along a maxed out young Leon, who's really impressive. It's cool to see him built as an Omni tank. And they're backing him up with a duo Lyn to help clean things up. Along with a Fjorm for isolation and the 3 mythics. I think this is a pretty solid team. Leon's actually very good at just intercepting and surviving an enemy phase, and, well, once things are out of position, Lyn's usually very good at cleaning things up afterwards. Unfortunately, I think they got caught off guard by Eliud rallying forward. And, well, they can't isolate both dancers, so Eliud gets to move in and take down Plumeria before Felix warps forward and knocks out Leon.
Here, take this. Of course I failed.
And we can't get in range of the rest of the team, but that's enough for them to surrender the match and move on. This one was another fun match to see. They brought along a harmonic Catria to help support their Fallen Edelgard, along with this +10 Brave Lucina, who's a real treat to see. It's a good kit to get for her from the Forma, and I think Catria is a great way to help enable Fallen Edelgard, since she actually lets Edelgard get around her usual 1 attack per combat restriction, which can really help her punch through some of the targets that would usually give her trouble. Unfortunately, they end up going for the same turn 1 positioning as the last team. And just like the last team, Eliud gets rallied forward and danced, which gives Felix a jumping point to pick off Catria.
Was this my fate?
Eliud actually can't quite take Reagan out in combat thanks to Lucina's drive effects. But he does survive, and that gets him a Gale Force, which lets him pick Reagan off the next round.
Not good enough.
And unfortunately, Dorothea does get baited forward here. She can't get much done against Lucina. And the rest of the team can't get in range. But 2 knockouts already is a good start. And while they do have Edelgard start cleaning things up, now that she's transformed, she can gale force her way through the team. But from there, she doesn't really have any good targets left, and once they realize that, they surrender and move on. This one was neat to see too. It's not actually too common that I see a near-save bodyguard paired up with a mage tank. And Julia, I think, is actually a really good mage tank overall, since as long as you take out the melee factors, she's very, very strong at handling enemy mages. And they've also got Furum for the isolation support, and a Zealot for the bonus unit and some extra drives. It was a bit interesting to see a third match in a row take this formation on turn 1. And well, a lot like the previous two, it doesn't work out so well. Julia might be very good at handling mage tanks, but Felix is not something she wants to tangle with. And while Gustav does intercept Eliwood pretty well, the damage is already done, and losing Julia is enough for them to surrender and move on. This one was another fun one to see, mostly just because I haven't actually seen many maxed out Brunnyas in quite a while. And it's neat to see this one, especially since she's in the Hall of Forms right now. They're backing her up with a bonus week Roy, and a Furum for some isolation support. And the Mythics as well. Honestly, it's really pretty all in on making sure that Brunnya can just tank the world. And when she's got this level of investment, I can definitely see it working out for them most of the time. They decide to go in on the first turn and just have Brunnya attack Eliwood. And while that does actually chunk Eliwood pretty hard, it doesn't knock him out.
I will face my fate.
And, well, not being able to knock Rajat out in one round means that she doesn't get to heal with Soul. Fatal Smoke gets applied, and Rajat gets to do as she pleases. She can't actually knock Furum out here, which is a bit unfortunate, but on the other hand, she does drop Furum really low, which stops her from being able to isolate anything on the following turn. Brunnya, on the other hand, does a really impressive job surviving. And even Felix can't quite finish her off. And since Mirabilis is isolated, nobody gets to get danced again, and they can start trying to clean things up on this turn. Roy doesn't have any problems finishing Rajat off.
I won't give in.
And Brunnya can finish Eliwood off as well, but she can't actually heal herself thanks to the Fatal Smoke. So from here they just try to retreat and get themselves out of range. But ground orders means that Felix has a very easy path forward to snipe Roy.
This is your name on it.
Hope will never die.
And now that there's no isolation, he gets danced. And picks off Plumeria.
Knew it.
And then danced again to finish off the third unit on their front line.
Enough.
And once they've lost half their team like that, that's enough for them to move on. This one was a fun match to see. It's a bit of a throwback with the Leila and Duofonse. A while ago, this was actually one of the combos that could just crack my defense open no matter what I did. Things have changed since then. I do think these two are still a really effective combo, and I think if they had an Infantry Pulse on Leila and Times Pulse on Alphonse to pre-charge his special, even through a Duo's Hindrance, it would actually make them a lot better overall. They take a couple of turns here just to move into position. And once they're ready, they move Ashura forward to attack into Felix. The bonus weak stats help her actually survive Felix's counterattack. But without having another teammate in range to help enable her weapon, she just can't quite punch through him. So they hit and run instead and pull back into the corner to try and dodge the follow-up. Unfortunately for them, Eliud actually ends up rallying back into his corner instead of running off on his own, which makes this really difficult to engage. Leila can take a free shot at Saros, but without his special, Alphonse can't get anything done, and they just surrender there. This one was neat to see, just because I was using Legendary Claude on my offenses this week, so it was fun to see him show up on the defense. I think backing him up with a Fjorm or a Hilda now for isolation support is one of the better ways to enable him, since isolation is one of those ways to stop the team from moving further than you'd like them to once you've got the gravity effect going. They've also got a Zealot for the bonus unit, and a few mythics to round out the team. They take a turn to move into position and make sure that Mirabilis is isolated, but I think they may have been counting a little too hard on this bolt trap actually being real. And without that damage, Claude can't actually break through Felix, and they surrender. This one was the loss of the week, which is always a bit unfortunate to see, but it happens. They brought along a Fallen Edelgard and a bonus week Legendary Roy, backed up by this brave Camilla, who I think is the main enabler for this team. Having a dazzling gravity effect on top of a very solid player phase is a powerful combination. It's a lot like Legendary Claude, actually, just as a healer instead. They take a couple of turns just to break the structures and move into position while they wait for their bolt tower. And, well, an unsniped bolt tower is a great way to find an opening in this defense. Once the damage comes through, Camilla can move in and pick off Felix. Before getting danced, and sniping Rashad as well. From here they actually have a pretty clever bit of maneuvering
I'm going to stop you.
that lets them use Rake and snipe Mirabilis before they have Edelgard pivot up and intercept the rest of the team. They almost planned this out perfectly, actually, to get a clean win. But unfortunately, the gravity doesn't stop Dorothea from getting to Wings of Mercy in for an attack. And, for once,
Watch your step.
that Wings of Mercy actually secures a knockout. The rest of the team can't really get past this Fallen Edelgard.
Crumble to ash.
They did a really good job of setting her up to get lunged onto the defense tile. And well, once she's there, she's not going to move very far.
Perish.
They decide to keep going and finish the map from here, which really isn't hard. Reagan can clean up Dorothea. And Fallen Edelgard can gale force through the rest of our Edelgard's hit points before Camilla picks up a pot and they close things out.
Face your mortality.
I'm not too worried about this one. We did secure a knockout and they didn't even pick up the second pot, so it's alright. It's always nice to bounce back from a failure with a success. And this one was fun to see, mostly because of a +10 Lynja. She's always a bit of a menace, especially once you get her to that sort of investment level. And backing her up with this young Leone, also +10. Very nice. And then rounding them out with this +10 Tamari Lachesis. The +8 Reagan on the side is also a very significant hit and run force on her own. And altogether, I think this team actually has a pretty easy time cracking open most defenses they run into. Either they hit and run with Reagan and Lynn before intercepting with Leone, or they just use Leone to let the enemy team start the fight, and then break things apart afterwards with Reagan and Lynn. They do have a bit of a problem here though, since we did snipe their bolt tower. And without that extra damage, they can't actually crack this open with Reagan and Lynn, so they decide to let Ashura take point instead. The panic doesn't actually affect her, but well, Hollywood still rallies forward and gets danced, which gives him a very easy knockout on Plumeria. And then Felix can step forward and one-shot Ashura.
And
The rest of the team can't quite get in range here. And they do keep going, at least for a bit. Reagan can take down Hollywood in the player phase without any real problems. And Lynn can take down Saros thanks to Ruptured Sky. But at that point, they're kind of out of options, and I guess the losses were enough for them to concede and move on. This was another fun approach to see. We brought along a pretty diverse set of non-mythic units, including a non-Farsave Brave Hector. Even without Farsave, I think he's still a very powerful tank. And they're backing him up with a lot of support, including a male Corrin for his Auto Refine, and a Hinoka who's capable of giving him some very long-range support with her Refined Rain. And Micaiah, of course, who's always a bit of a menace to my team. They start things off on the first turn, which might have been a bit earlier than they needed to. I figured they might be better off waiting for their bolt tower turn, or the turn before it. But they go in right away, and
Not good enough.
Eliwood rallies forward again, and can one-shot Reagan. That does mean that he doesn't get 2 Gale Force afterwards, which is a little unfortunate. But Rajat doesn't have any problems sweeping Hector, and then she gives Felix a nice jumping point to pick off Corin. This does stop us from actually taking Hector out on the next turn, but losing those 2 is enough for them to surrender and move on. This one was a fun way to close the week out. It's a rematch with the plus 10 Fallen Dimitri that I ran into on offense earlier in the week. And they brought along a maxed out Fallen Leon as a nice compliment to him. I do think these two are a great pair to work with. Leon can intercept a lot of ranged opponents without any problems at all, and once the map has started moving, Dimitri is a great way to clean things up. They've got Sol as their bonus unit too, and a nice diverse set of mythics to work with. And they do take a couple of turns just to move into position here, try to find a good angle to work with, and also wait for Dimitri to get his odd Tempest back. Sniping their bolt tower does a lot of work for us here, and means it's a lot harder for Dimitri to actually knock anything out. Or Reagan, for that matter. And they smite Dimitri forward here, which gives him a much easier Kanto to move back out with. Even if he can't kill Edelgard, much to his dismay, he can still retreat safely. And then they can park Leon over on the other side of the map to try and divert the range. Unfortunately, as is kind of the theme for this week, Eliwood just rallies forward and gets danced for an easy knockout. The rest of their team is far enough out of range that we can't catch up, which lets them keep going on the next turn without too much trouble. Getting to apply flash is actually very important here, since it lets Reagan attack into Edelgard safely. Without the flash effect, Edelgard would actually have knocked her out on the counter. But with it, it lets her soften Edelgard up enough for Dimitri to move in and finish her off. Unfortunately, at this point, they're left very exposed for the following turn, and Rajat starts things off with an easy knockout on Naga. And then gets danced. And can do the same to Dimitri. And then at that point, Eliwood can get his Gale Force, pick up an easy knockout on Plumeria, before doing the same thing to Reagan.
Not good enough.
And with Sol as the only unit they have left, there's no way they can win it anymore. Overall, the defense held up really well this week. It's good to see, especially since it lets me focus on tinkering with the newer Dark Defense instead. it'll be interesting to see how well that one does next week. I'm hoping for the best. I do have a Discord link in the description if you'd like to hang out and chat, and there's also a Patreon page if you'd like to help support the channel. As always, I hope you've enjoyed the video, good luck with your own matches, and I'll see you next time.